For years I've started game projects that never went anywhere. This time I've decided to do it a little differently. I'm building my first multiplayer Steam game from scratch, documenting every step of the process and seeing if I can actually make it all the way to release. As a solo developer, that means handling everything myself, from the networking and gameplay systems to the art, sound and publishing. My idea is simple, a multiplayer party shooter that combines the fast-paced chaos of games we all love with a top-down 2D pixel art style. Every week I'll be tackling a new challenge, sharing the progress, the mistakes, and hopefully getting one step closer to finally releasing a finished game. Hello friends, welcome to the first entry. To start off, I want my project to be relatively small and achievable. The goal is to create something that I can play with my friends and community, while learning everything that goes into building and shipping a multiplayer game. For development, I'll be using Unity, Sprite, and Ableton. Are they the perfect tools for the job? Probably not. Though they are the tools I already know and I'm comfortable using them. Before I actually start building anything, I need to make a few decisions. The biggest being multiplayer. Since the game is built around playing with friends, I want multiplayer to be an integral part of my project from day one, rather than something that's bolted on later. To start, I want to enable my players to be able to connect to their friends and play together. Later on I may take a look at dedicated hosting, but that's not the plan for now. After looking at different options like Unity Netcode, Mirror, Photon Fusion, and Fishnet, I've decided to go with Fishnet. It has great documentation, strong community support, and seems like a good fit for a small multiplayer game. And of course the biggest reason, it just looked the easiest. As for the gameplay, I'm currently leaning towards a class-based system where different characters have unique mechanics and combat styles. I also want maps to be interactive, with hidden mechanics and environmental features that players can discover as they play. Visually, I'm aiming for a Neo-Tokyo cyber-noir aesthetic. Altered Carbon is one of my all-time favourite shows, and you should absolutely watch it if you haven't already. I'll be drawing a lot of inspiration from that style and atmosphere. With the planning out of the way, it's time to start building. I started a new Unity project and I started getting the network implementation sorted, which, using Fishnet, was surprisingly easy. With Fishnet, you basically just add a networking manager so you can host and join lobbies. At this point I had my players connecting, but they were nothing more than just basic cubes. Getting my players connected and moving around was relatively straightforward. The real challenge came when I connected a second player. My first attempt went amazing without any issues at all. None at all. Every player definitely couldn't also control every other player at the same time. With that fixed, I finally had two players connected and moving around the same game world. Next I wanted to experiment with interactive objects, like this big red movable cube I made. The plan is for maps to contain things like hidden doors, traps, and movable objects, so getting those synced across the network is going to be very important. Unfortunately, while my big red cube worked perfectly on the host, other clients couldn't interact with it correctly at all. Even worse, the server and clients completely disagreed about where the object actually was. The server knew the correct position, but the clients didn't, which caused some pretty major desync issues. After spending far longer than I'd like to admit looking through the Fishnet documentation, and with a little help from my friend Claude's cousin, I eventually tracked down the problem. I just wasn't communicating the object state correctly between the server and the client. Once that was fixed, everything finally started behaving properly. Though I did run into one final problem. While everything was now syncing correctly, the non-host player was experiencing some noticeable input lag. After digging again, and experimenting with prediction settings, I eventually got things feeling a lot more responsive. With movement and networking in a much better place, I was finally able to start experimenting with projectiles. My goal here wasn't to build a full combat system just yet, I just wanted to make sure players could spawn objects and have them sync correctly across the network. As expected, it worked perfectly first time with absolutely no issues at all.
None whatsoever.
The projectiles were spawning locally, but they weren't appearing correctly across clients because I wasn't spawning them through the server. Once I moved the spawning logic to a server RPC and let Fishnet handle the network spawning, everything started working as expected. I then started looking at projectiles and having them spawn directly from my players instead, as if they were shooting. I also want the projectiles to know which player they're coming from, in case I want to add things like friendly fire. Each projectile should know where it's come from and won't interact with the player that spawned them in. Next I made the projectiles come out based on the direction that the players are pointing the mouse, and then travel towards that direction. I also moved the place shooting into its own script, instead of just bundling it into the controls, to have a nice clean split between the two systems before the code got messy and out of hand. One issue I quickly ran into was that bullets kept colliding with each other. While I could have solved this using Unity layers, I decided to handle it in code instead, so I'd have more flexibility layer for mechanics like projectile interception. Now my projectiles no longer interact with the player that sent them, or the other bullets shot by the same player, but will still collide with another player. My projectiles also now come out from the players. However, I made a mistake, and the calculation for the angles were being done based on the server, not on the clients. So while it works correctly on my server-side player, the client-side players aren't doing the calculations for the mouse position, causing the bullets to travel out seemingly aimlessly. Having fixed that, the projectiles are now being shot from both players in the correct direction on both clients. However, something didn't seem quite right about it visually. I think it was because of the rotation of the squares. So next up I drew some basic bullet assets for my players to fire. I made it white so that I can make the bullets whatever colour I want within Unity just by changing the sprite's colour. I then took a look at giving my players some health, so they can actually fight and die. Again, this will all be server-side, so the players and the servers are always synced up. Now that my players had health, I started working on a way for them to take damage. While it was quite an easy implementation, I spent a while trying to debug why my bullets weren't doing any damage. As it turns out, if you don't tell the bullets to do any damage, they won't do any damage. Seeing as I've never done multiplayer, I wasn't sure how to best to make it so that my players' health was synced across clients correctly. I contemplated just having all of the clients change their values each time a player got hit, but instead I found out about sync files, which are essentially just a way for the values to always be synced up on the server, so anyone that's joining the game will have the correct health values for all players, even if they join partway through the game. I also had some issues getting my clients to sync with the server, but I eventually discovered the problem was that I was just using the wrong fishnet attribute. Originally I had this marked as a server RPC, which is normally used when a client needs to request something from a server. But in this case, as the bullets already existed on the server, there was no request to make. Server good, server RPC bad. I then gave my players some visual indicators. It's just some basic bars that display each player's health above their character for now, though I'm not sure if I want to keep those in, or maybe it adds an extra element of fun not knowing exactly how much HP someone is on. Now, players are completely destroyed, which works, but isn't how I want to handle death long term. But it'll do for now. My players can finally move about, shoot projectiles at each other, and be destroyed. For the first time, the project actually started feeling like a game. Now that the networking is implemented, and I have players moving around, surely the hardest part is over. Right? Right, guys? Next week, combat, animations, and an alarming number of bugs. Sharing these updates is also a great way to keep myself accountable. I've started plenty of projects over the years, as you've seen, that never made it very far, and I'm hoping that documenting the journey helps me finally get across the finish line with this one. This game is ultimately being built so I can play it with my friends and my community, so if you'd like to be a part of that journey, come and join us on Discord. I'll be sharing progress updates, discussing ideas, and eventually running playtests as development continues. There is a link in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next update.